Right? What stands against evil, right, is the dignity of the individual. The dignity of the individual means always we look at the facts. We never act before talking to all sides. We don't blog right before checking the facts. Right? We just don't do that. We don't repeat things, right, because we heard them. We actually check the facts before we put it out there in the world. And that's a basic obligation, right, in terms of the Judaic ethic of tikkun olam, the Judaic ethic of kind of how to be a good person. So it's been great, here talking to Levi. I'm sure we're going to disagree in the future. I wish he'd find something else to write about. God, find something more interesting. But I send him and wish him, blessings. And as long as we're able to, we may not be able to long term, maybe we will. But if at least we can stick to the facts, right, then perhaps we can actually do something that's good. It's not driven just by the writer's vanity. It's not driven by kind of a desire to get good ratings on a blog. What are we doing together, all of us, to make the world an actually better place? I mean, that's the question.
I get my response now. You had 3 guys, this is my last. This is my third. Okay, so I get this all the time, and I don't think it's a very intelligent or thought through response, and that is, who appointed me to blog? Like, who appointed Marc Gafni to write a book, Soul Prince? Marc's readers appointed him, the publisher, accepted his book proposal and published him. Why is that any more or less credible than the thousands of people who choose to read me each day? I've made a living as a blogger for 11 years. I think there may be 2 other people in the world who can say that. So obviously someone who's made a living as a blogger, and today there are probably about 24 people who make an independent living as a blogger in the world. So there are millions of people out there blogging, and there's about 0.0001% of us who make a living at it. Obviously, those of us who are making a living at it, there's something formidable about what we're doing. So I don't see how, some days I get 30,000 readers to my blog. I don't see how the people who choose to read me, as opposed to reading an article by Marc Gafni or by Dennis Prager, or any more or less credible, and that make my work any more or less credible. There are millions of bloggers out there. Why do hundreds of people choose to link to me? Why does the New York Times choose to write about me? Why does the LA Times choose to write about me? Why does 60 Minutes feature me? Entertainment Tonight, almost every major form of media in the world has quoted my work, and that's because my work is significant. And it's no less and it's no more significant because I choose to work on my own than if I chose to work for some media entity or I had a non-profit foundation sponsoring me. Second, Mark's point that we don't have the right to punish, that belongs to God. Well, God explicitly gives us the right to punish. For instance, in every book of the Torah, and this is the only law that is affirmed in every book of the Torah, he says that you shall put murderers to death, capital punishment. That requires human intervention to kill people. So clearly, we do have a right to punish. One of the 7 laws of the sons of Noah is that you should set up courts of law. And what do courts of law do? One of their key functions is that they punish. It is impossible to lead a life without making judgments. You have to constantly make judgments. I made a judgment to spend this weekend with Marc Gafni.
Nice weekend.
Yeah, and a good weekend. So I have values and I make judgments. You should make judgments. Everybody should make judgments. So the important thing is that your judgments be correct. The important thing when you report is that you be fair and that you be accurate and that you be appropriate to the sin. So I see nothing wrong with taking a photo of a girl who refuses to pick up dog poop on a train when she's been caught on it. Take that photo and say, this girl refused to pick up dog poop. Go beyond that, put her home address, that's too far. Go beyond that, say she's evil, that's too far.
Good.
Okay, that's my point.
Let's just do, and if there's anything you need to counterpoint on this, you actually have the right. That's exactly. Let's just say 2 things. One is, when Luke kind of defends the integrity of his right to blog, I agree with that. Right? When Luke says, right, his work stands on its own merit, whether or not there's a private foundation backing it, absolutely right. When Luke, or Levi, let's go Levi, not Luke. When Levi talks about, having been written up in major places, that's less important to me, simply because, I don't believe in the People magazine kind of culture of celebrity, way of kind of establishing credibility. But there's all sorts of people, good and bad, who have been written up by all those magazines, and the fact that someone's written up by them doesn't give them credibility, it gives them notoriety. And notoriety and credibility are two different things. What I would agree with, and I want to kind of end with our shared ground, right, is that it's got to be accurate, right? It's got to be reliable. It's got to be checked before being put up. When Dennis Prager or Marc Gafni or anyone decides to write a book, that's a completely fair thing to do. But if they're going to write a book about another person, not about ideas, they need to, before they publish the book, check with the other person very carefully to make sure that what they're saying about them is accurate. Otherwise, they're subject to libel. However, I'm not talking about being legally subject to libel because that's very difficult to enforce, as we all know. I'm talking about, in the sense of tikkun olam, ethically subject to libel. And I think that going forward, Levi and I actually agree on that. That before we actually publish something about a person, we need to think about why we're doing it. Is it important? But whatever our reasons are, whether we should or shouldn't, let's put that aside. Minimally, it has to have accurate information. And Levi and I talked about this in a different context this morning, about someone publishing inaccurate information. And we both agree that's a heinous thing. To publish inaccurate information or to distort, right, is something that no one has a right to do. So that's, I think, really, really important. And I hope that going forward, we actually all have the ability, myself, Levi, and everyone, to give up being right. When Levi and I had a discussion yesterday, and one of the rules we made for the discussion was, let's take ego out of the discussion. It's not a Levi-Marc conversation. It's let's together look for truth. Let's look for a deeper understanding. Let's try and hold as many perspectives as we can and try and understand, what is more true, what's more deep, what's more beautiful, what's more holy here, right? And that's a powerful idea. So, wishing Levi a beautiful trip back to Los Angeles, the city of angels. You should be one of those angels. And maybe just to make the last point in terms of being one of those angels, right? Levi talked about courts of law. Courts of law, when they're not corrupt, right, actually are the appropriate mechanisms to punishment. That's absolutely completely correct. However, when an individual blogger, right, arrogates to themselves, I'm going to start writing about, that actress, and I'm going to kind of say things that I'm not talking about Levi now, let me be clear. I'm talking about some, blogger X decides to write about a particular actress because he thinks she's done something wrong, starts publishing inaccurate information about her because he's decided that she deserves punishment. I would hope that both Levi and I agree that's inappropriate. There's a difference between a court of law, where there's checks and balances, right, that's what's called justice, right, and between, right, vigilante justice or mob justice, right? The very mark of a civilization, the very mark of human evolution, the very mark of the divine evolving is the movement from vigilante justice, the individual, right, bless you, who uses their arbitrary power, whether it's the power of their sword, whether it's the power of their fist or the power of their blog, right, to impose, right, their arbitrary justice. The difference between that and a court of law is the difference between civilization and barbarity. There's an enormous distinction between those two, right, and we'll unfold in that direction. Amen.
Okay, so here we are in Capitol Reef National Park.